So first of all, thanks all for joining our webinar. As mentioned, this is about Kiwi legal professionals who are thinking or having their plans to relocate over to Australia. Just a few introductions first. My name's Lisa Gray. I'm a legal recruiter based in Auckland. I've been working in this sector for about 10 years now. I've spent a lot of time recruiting, researching, building up the knowledge for Kiwis heading over to Australia, and spent a lot of time placing you guys over there. Ben, do you want to introduce yourself too?
Yes, so my name is Ben Holloway. I'm actually based down here in Christchurch, and I have been in recruitment for over 10 years now. I think it's coming on 7 with Tyler Wren. And likewise, I help people locally, but also relocating to Australia.
Great, thanks, Ben. So why do we feel qualified to talk to you about this? So as said, we've got the knowledge and we've spent a lot of time talking about this. We've also got boots on the ground in Australia. I guess the difference between working with us versus a local Australian recruiter is because you're at the forefront of our mind. We understand how New Zealand qualifications, those New Zealand firms, the work experience translates across into Aussie. In addition to that, just as a couple of stats, we're placing about 3 New Zealand qualified professionals, oh my goodness, a month over to Australia. That's been up and down depending on that kind of market. As we've said, over 10 years of experience. We very much know your value. Also, if you do talk to us about it, we don't just dump you off to our Australian team. We're with you every step of the way, acting as a standing board, talking to you about firms and making sure that you're really, really comfortable with the process. I'm going to go through each city and give you a bit of an overview of the key centres. We've got some specific market intelligence and a bit of a legal job market outlook. We're going to talk to you about how to get ready to roll in terms of getting CV ready and knowledge ready for Australia. And then we're going to talk about you and how to plan that move effectively. So Ben, do you want to crack on with Perth? Just before Ben does that, just so you know, we're doing a bit of an overview, but in addition to that, we've given each city a mark out of 10, and that mark out of 10 really gives you that kind of guide on the appetite for those guys to hire New Zealand legal professionals.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Lisa. This on our screen, you can see Perth. So Perth is close to my heart. It's the reason why I wanted to talk about it. I did live there for a couple of years, and before I moved to New Zealand. So it's obviously the furthest away from New Zealand. So in terms of traveling back to New Zealand for family and for holidays, I mean, that is obviously a cost and a time aspect. The rental market is quite competitive due to the mining sector. So a lot of people are renting in Perth. The cost of living is generally more affordable than Sydney and Melbourne. As I said, I lived there. There's plenty of beaches, lots of sunshine. It's really warm, but not humid like a Brisbane. So it's a really good, if you're not good with the humidity like myself. They have more sunshine hours than any other city or capital city in Australia, so that's great for outdoor lifestyle, and it's also close to some really good national parks in Western Australia, Margaret River to the south, which is good for in the wine regions and wineries and stuff like that. So it's got a really good lifestyle. So we scored it 8 out of 10. The demand for New Zealand qualified lawyers and professionals. So the demand for legal professionals in Perth is strong across all sectors. The market is smaller than Sydney and Brisbane, so it's worth considering, but most national and mid-tier firms have offices in Perth. They might be smaller, but the work is high quality, especially around the mining sector. In terms of the smaller firms, there is a lot of those. It is quite a competitive market as well, reflecting, I guess, the size of the market. Perth is, population-wise, I might be slightly out of date here, but it's very similar to Auckland, to give a scale of city. In terms of the place itself, because it's not the biggest city in Australia, it does have a really good close-knit community.
Yeah, just to touch Perth again, we've placed quite a few lawyers in Perth, and if you can deal with the commute, with that kind of longer time back to New Zealand, we have amazing feedback in terms of community, lifestyle. Yeah, anyone that we place there has got on really, really well there. Adelaide is, I guess, a bit of a hidden secret. I had no regard for Adelaide until I actually went to visit a friend there a couple of years ago, and it really opened my eyes in terms of the lifestyle, food, yes, wineries, the Barossa Valley just on your doorstep. Housing is really affordable and there's plenty of it. It's a really clean city, and it's also known as the city of festivals. So it's got a bit of a Wellington vibe about it. Great weather, great beaches. In terms of the work, yes, the market is smaller. So we've given it about a 6 out of 10. It's a bit more tight-knit. There's a bit more of a local feel to it. There's still some good mid-tier firms there as well. And there is appetite to hire New Zealand qualified, although the guys down there are getting more used to considering New Zealand legal professionals over the local market. Their appetite to hire has grown. So with that, I guess their mindset has changed a wee bit. So again, if you've never thought of somewhere like Adelaide, it might be an option as a bit of a wild card for you. We'll move on to Melbourne now. So this seems to be every Kiwi's dream. I would say 65 to 70% of New Zealand legal professionals that we talk to all want to head to Melbourne. The thing is with Melbourne is it's still really attractive for locals and also Australian lawyers wanting to move interstate. So twinned with that, Melbourne hasn't been that flash from an economic point of view, probably for the last 18 months. So the legal jobs market has been a wee bit flat there, although that doesn't mean to say that it is a no-go. Those with very specialist skills are still very welcome in Melbourne. We're talking employment, corporate, litigation, construction, but again, they are way more picky, way more choosy as to who they're looking at. You need realistically about 4 years PQE to be considered in Melbourne, but again, there are pockets. Just last week, we placed a family lawyer in Melbourne, which again, we were really surprised at, but it is possible. It tends to take time, and if you are more open, it's worth considering the other states. We've given it a 7 out of 10, purely because of the sheer size of the market and I guess more so the populace than anything else.
Good stuff. So we'll move on to Sydney. Again, another city I absolutely love. Somewhere I went before I had kids many times. So it's obviously the biggest legal market in Australia. Demand is intense, particularly in the banking, finance, and M&A space. Most global top-tier firms are headquartered here, offering the biggest transactions and the most complex work in the country. Salaries are the highest in Australia, which is the positive. That does unfortunately mean it's also the most expensive city in Australia. So that's from everything from rentals to just your daily expenses. So that is a factor to consider. Relocators that we've put there, often comment on the fast-paced energy of the city. It's unlike anything you can really experience in New Zealand, and has amazing access to beaches and all the other stuff that Australia has. It's also very easy to hop back to New Zealand. Obviously, most cities in New Zealand fly to Sydney regularly. So yeah, it's a really good place for lawyers, and it's the highest demand that we have. If Sydney is an option for you, then obviously we'd love to talk about that with you.
We have placed more lawyers in Sydney, and also legal secretaries, and also paralegals and legal assistants in the market, just because of the sheer size of it. So again, if you're thinking, you want to get to Aussie, but you're not quite sure where to go, that would be top of my list if I was considering that.
Stuff. So next is Brisbane. So Brisbane is obviously different to Perth, which was my favorite, but I did spend time in Brisbane as well. It is a different climate altogether, much more humid, it has a rainy season, just down the road from theme parks. So very much an outdoor city, and a great place if you've got kids and maybe a different stage in life. But in terms of, we've given this an 8 out of 10. Brisbane's legal market is booming. It's driven by strong population growth. The city is growing, and obviously we've got the Olympics coming up in 2032. So the main sectors leading this growth are construction, energy and resources. Most national firms do have a presence here, and we're seeing global firms enter the market quite aggressively. So it is an up and coming area, and a good option for New Zealand qualified lawyers and professionals. People who relocate to Brisbane and people that we've put there do always talk about the lifestyle, the weather, the outdoor culture. The value in the housing market is still reasonable compared to other states, and still having access to high quality commercial work. So it is something that we've rated quite highly, and we do see a lot of success with New Zealand qualified professionals.
Great, thank you. So we're going to go on to the curveball, are we? Which is Canberra.
Yeah.
Canberra, honestly, is a funny one. With it being the capital, like Wellington, a lot of the work is driven by government, regulatory, administrative law. The private sector there is dominated by top tier and national firms servicing federal contracts and defence projects. I guess one major issue for New Zealand qualified lawyers in Canberra is that for a lot of those jobs, you have to have Australian security clearances. And unfortunately, if you're not an Australian citizen, you can't get one. So a lot of those particular jobs are not accessible for New Zealand qualified lawyers or for those kind of supporting professionals. At the same time, there are also pockets in terms of private client work, and there is a smaller market there in terms of commercial work and all the stuff that we've already discussed outside of government. So if you really want Canberra, there is a skill shortage there of New Zealand, of legal professionals. So that you are welcomed there, absolutely. It's just navigating the nuances between what you require in order to be able to work for a firm. That's something that we've learned painfully, but it is something that we can absolutely assist you with and make sure that you're not kind of falling into those pitfalls. It's cheaper rent than most other cities. Cost of living is great. Again, although it is furthest from any coastline, there's still amazing hiking, mountains, there's some great culture there. So yeah, it's a great city to live in, but again, it's one of those things that we would need to tease out depending on your experience. We're giving Canberra about a 6.5 out of 10.
Good stuff. So we're going to go on to salaries next. So I've separated the salaries by top tier, mid tier, and smaller boutique firms. We're going to put the slides up there of those salaries. We do have a salary guide which you can download, which includes these salaries. Also, you can come back later on. We will be publishing this video and just pause it if you want to look at it in more detail. We will talk through this very high level, just because it is quite a wide topic and we could spend quite a lot of time on this. These salaries are inclusive of superannuation, so that is something worth noting. If you've been on Seek or you've talked to colleagues that may have moved over there, is understanding whether the salary they're talking about is inclusive of superannuation or not. It's a bit like KiwiSaver. The difference is it's much larger proportion of the salary. So yeah, if you see a salary, just try and figure out whether it is or isn't, because that could make quite a difference. In terms of those salaries, obviously different cities pay more. Sydney would be, or Sydney, Melbourne would probably be the higher payers. Adelaide, as we've mentioned earlier, tends to be a little bit less. So they're all things worth considering.
Yeah, I guess the key patterns that we notice is that, firstly, this is a PQE level in Australia. So we'll come on to this in a bit more detail, but due to the education gap of you kind of relocating across and the knowledge gap, you probably need to class yourself maybe a year to 18 months, depending on your specialism below. So if you're a 4-year PQE lawyer in New Zealand, you probably want to be looking at that kind of 3-year PQE range. The other thing that we noticed is there's a big jump from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, and we noticed that across all levels of firm and all cities. That's where the Aussies feel that, you know, someone's really kind of ramping up, built their knowledge, etc., etc. The other thing is that senior associate level is very hard to gauge. We have placed senior associates with a banding of maximum minimums of between 100K. So if you want specific salary information for yourself and to your experience level and to your specialism, the easiest thing for you to do is to get in touch with us. This is very much an indication of where you kind of land. Also, superannuation is ticking over at 12.5% at the moment.
Stuff. Cool. So there was one final slide as well, which is legal support salaries as well. So I'll leave that on for a few seconds as well. Did you want to add anything on those roles, Lisa?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is, which if you've done any research, if there's any legal executives on the webinar, they don't really, the title doesn't really exist in Australia. What I found for legal executives heading over to Australia is that we place them into senior legal secretarial roles or senior paralegal roles, but experience translates actually about the same rate. So rather than qualified lawyers needing to shave a bit of time of PQE off of their experience, that doesn't translate as much for secretarial and support staff. So these salaries would be right for where your level of experience is here in New Zealand.
Excellent. So we'll move on to the current legal job market outlook.
Okay, that's me. So it's been a tough one to predict, and we're talking to our Aussie teams every day. But I guess we wanted to give you a bit of a highlight as to what's going on, a bit of a taster as to what's going on at the moment. So we had this huge boom straight after COVID, and I'm not bored of hearing that. But then things kind of flattened off, and then they've kind of started going really busy again, really just at the back end of last year. 6 months prior to that, things were a little bit flat. Firms were still hiring, they still had appetite to hire, but they were less likely to take the risk. They were being more thorough and they were being more picky, matching skills, matching experience, being way more specific rather than thinking, you know, corporate advisory into transactional. They weren't doing that, whereas they had been doing that a few years ago. In terms of demand, that 0 to 2, unless you've got a real specialism, is still quite a struggle to place New Zealand qualified lawyers with 0 to 2 years PQE. There's obviously quite a flurry of grads coming out into the Australian market, and they're not seeing individuals move as much at that level. Therefore, there's not as many jobs available. Where we have seen more, I guess, need and through growth or through just lack of specialism, again, it's that class action, insurance, employment, banking, finance, construction. So they're still really highly sought after. So if you've got about 18 months experience and you're from a top tier firm with specialism, absolutely, you can transition across with that level of experience. At 2 to 4 years, we're seeing the demand grow, both for NZ lawyers, but also legal professionals as well. Again, specialisms, really, really important in that bracket. But again, way more appetite to hire. Then once you're hitting that 4 to 6 point, again, for all professionals, it's really, really high demand. Again, thinking of specialisms, individuals that can demonstrate areas of expertise, absolutely, there is real interest in that. And senior associate, again, more so for, I'd say, junior senior associates, those who are tapping at partner. Law firms for qualified lawyers tend to have those roles already in their succession plan, and it's not as easy to place individuals that are really wanting partner, you know, no network, lack of knowledge, etc. So the junior senior associates, the market is really, really, really hot. Again, just touching on that, legal secretarials and execs and assistant side, really great tech skills are really important. Great communication skills are really important for those guys, and flexibility. They also have a need for specialisms as well. But again, if our legal support individuals are coming out from more of a broader range, there does seem to be a bit more lenience on that side. So hot to trot right now, as we've already talked about, dispute resolution, energy resources, construction, front end and back end. We've just heard a new ruling has come out from the High Courts, which means that a lot of historical abuse claims, which would have been settled before, are now going to be becoming litigious. So this has created a massive boom of jobs throughout Sydney and Melbourne. So although we talked about Melbourne being a bit flat, if you have experience in that area, we should be able to secure you a job in that area of expertise. So we also wanted to talk about, they're not necessarily barriers, but they're things for you to really, really be aware of when placing yourself in the Australian market. So even though as a New Zealand qualified lawyer, you can sort out your admittance certificate to the state that you want to work in, down to the Trans-Tasman Mutual Recognition Act, you know, it's a really easy process to do. The fact is you've never practiced in the state that you practiced in. So there is absolutely a learning curve, which is why we've talked about that 1 year discount. So you'll be remunerated kind of a year below. What we found is a lot of lawyers that we've placed over into Aussie, they have started on, you know, what they would expect to be a slightly lower salary, but within a very short period of time, once they've come up to speed with regulations, process, knowledge of market, they're absolutely firing within a 6-month period, but there is that kind of pain threshold to go through from a knowledge, educational and kind of financial perspective. As I said, not as much for support staff. Your skills are very, very transferable over there. and don't require as much of that kind of local knowledge to be able to hit the ground running and offer the support that you can. We've also had to educate lawyers in terms of job title. So, you know, if you're a junior, senior associate over here, if you've literally been promoted to that role within 12 months, you might need to just drop down a band when going over to Aussie. That's the norm. If you're absolutely really bent on taking the title and you feel that, you know, you can do that, then it's a negotiation that we can take part in for you. But what we've seen is it's a much better landing having a slightly lower budget, a slightly lower level of expectation in terms of your peers when you join a law firm. You know, they have an expectation of your knowledge and being a go-to person if you carry, you know, a senior title, as well as, you know, those who are more junior than you. You want to make sure that you can absolutely act in that capacity. The other thing that we wanted to do was talk a little bit about the firm peers. At the end of the day, the Australian legal market is 5 times the size as the New Zealand market. So as an example, Clayton puts his class as a mid-tier in Australia, and it houses about 1,800 lawyers across Australia, and it's in every single city. It is Australian owned, but it is still classed in that kind of group. But they still have very, very large deals, much larger than the size of the top tiers in New Zealand. So if you're thinking top tier to top tier, you really need to be able to demonstrate the qualitative level of your work and ensuring that you have worked on the same scale and size of deals or matters or clients that that potential Australian firm operates with. Alternatively, you might just want to temper your expectations in terms of what label you put on the type of firm that you'll consider. Again, we've talked about those kind of transferable skills, and they do really vary. So we do see, as I've said, construction, banking and finance, employment, M&A, transfer over actually quite well. Where there, and again, it's not impossible, but where we do see maybe a bit of a stall or things are a bit more difficult, can be real estate strata, resource management, family law trusts. There will be more scrutiny in terms of what you've done, how you've done it, what laws you've looked at in New Zealand, how that translates into a particular state. Again, Western Australia seems to be quite more removed than New South Wales regs in terms of resource management, as an example.
Next, we wanted to discuss how to give yourself the best shot at securing a job in Australia. Some of this may seem like common sense and would be the same stuff you would do in New Zealand, but there are a couple of other things that are worth considering. So keep a detailed history of your matters that you're working on in New Zealand, and include those within the CV. So try not to keep avoid having your CV being just a bullet point of responsibilities and dates. You really want to sort of thread the matters within the CV to really show the sort of work that you've been working on. In terms of transcripts and admittance certificate, make sure you've got a official copy of those ready as well. They will be requested. Stay in regular contact with us. What we're talking about today and where the hotspots are, and you know what's you know which cities are doing what at the moment, that can change. So the information we're providing on that side of things is good for now. But if this is something you're looking to do in 6 months, 12 months, it's definitely worth keeping in touch and getting more up-to-date information. Be realistic on start dates. So firms in Australia are okay with 2 to 4 months. You wouldn't want to be applying for things 6 to 8 months out. They do understand notice periods and relocation. So 2 to 4 months is that sweet spot found with our applicants.
If you're a senior associate or a 5-year
unless there's
lawyer
obviously a visa
and your
involved.
skills are highly sought after, they will wait up for 6 months.
Okay, and obviously not all notice periods are 4 weeks either, so that's a conversation we can have. For those more senior people, those notice periods obviously stretch out. So I think we've discussed the PQE in quite some detail, so we won't dwell on that, but just understanding that is helpful. Decide on your minimum commitment. So Australian firms are no different to local firms. They want to understand the risk. Obviously, if a New Zealander is moving to Australia, there's always a risk that you may leave again. So they're going to want to know how committed you are to Australia. What is your long-term plan? So typically at least 2 years is what we would recommend. If relocating with your partner and children, can they secure work? Again, things can move quite quickly. So if you're a highly qualified lawyer and you secure something, within 4 weeks, 5 weeks, can your partner do that as well? And does that create a hurdle for you as a family? So do you need to consider schools? Which is the best state if you've got children? So having a real think about that, and something we can discuss with you obviously before we go to market. Arranging personal matters in New Zealand. So obviously if you're renting or if you even own a house, are you selling the house? Do you need to get renters into that property? And these are all things to consider before you start applying for jobs. Like I said, things can move quickly, and if you don't have everything in order, or at least a plan, then it can throw a real spanner in the work. Another one is pets. If you own a dog, look into what that involves to take that dog to Australia, and that is something that we actually do come across more often than you'd think. So start planning 6 to 12 months ahead. Do your research. Where do you want to live? What are the flights cost? And maybe even a visit to Australia to ensure that the city that you're thinking you want to live in is actually the city that is suitable for you. So real high level of some things to think about before applying for jobs, and that will help you secure a role. So the next part that we wanted to cover off was creating an Australian legal CV. So again, look, this isn't too different to New Zealand. You want a summary at the beginning, 3 to 4 sentences, just explaining sort of you and what you do. Core competencies, so list of technical skills and soft skills, that matters list that I mentioned before. So I think it's pretty much saying what I said before. Make sure you include that in the CV, not just bullet points in your CV of where you've worked and the responsibilities. So include the type of files you've been working on, the type of projects, the type of clients, the value of those clients. All that information is what they will be looking for to see how transferable your skill set is. I do have an example that I'm going to show you in a moment of a CV. I think Lisa mentioned at the beginning there, we can send this out to you. So if you are looking to put a CV together, we will provide pointers for you if you've shared one that you've made, but we can also share this template with you. So this is the template. Again, we obviously won't sit and read through all this. I'm conscious that we've already done sort of almost 40 minutes. So you can come back to this, freeze it, or again, we can send it to you. Was there anything you wanted to add on the CV side of things, Lisa?
No, I think if anybody, as I said, if you guys want this sent to you, we can absolutely do it. Just get in touch. I think the easiest way to think about it is those guys, I bet they're really caught up in terms of the deal and your technical expertise. Yes, they want to know that your culture fits. Yes, they want to know about your personality. But it's really important to them to make sure that, if they are going to hire you, that they're really comfortable with the level of work that you've done before.
Good stuff. So the next thing we wanted to talk about was visas. I think, Lisa, you're going to cover that.
Yeah, the easy bit. So basically, really, Aussies do not like to sponsor. So if you're a New Zealand citizen, you are home and host, easy peasy. We have only ever placed one person that has been sponsored by a firm, and that was actually a UK qualified lawyer, in England, a Wales qualified lawyer, I should say, that headed to Brisbane. apart from that, there isn't really much interest in sponsorship. So if you're a permanent resident at the moment, you do need to get your New Zealand citizenship sorted out. I've already mentioned a trans-Tasman mutual recognition arrangement, so you can be admitted without studying. Each state has a law society. If you drop onto their website, they'll show you the process to go through. It's dead easy. The cost is there, anywhere between 350 and 600 Aussie. The majority of law firms will cover that for you. New South Wales are wonderful, and they get theirs processed quick smart. Victoria isn't so hot. So have this really aware in your mind. As an example, we placed a lawyer into a law firm in Melbourne. They did not get this sorted out and had to operate at a level of a paralegal for 8 weeks when they started before their admittance came through, which wasn't the best start. They got over it, it was fine. But as you can imagine, it was a bit of a shaky start. So it's really good that we get this sorted out as quickly as possible.
Personal motivation is obviously important, and it's something that you really do need to portray within interviews. So why are you moving? Australian law firms want to know why. Is this a temporary backpacker move, or are you relocating as a family in a permanent capacity? Is it a long-term career move? So that's something you really do need to consider beforehand. So the big city move, as it says here, seeking top tier experience. There's work in Australia you can't get in New Zealand, so that is a very good motivation to move. It can be lifestyle. Obviously, we talk a lot about cost of living in New Zealand and the Australian way of life. So those are things that you need to discuss as well. I think just really having a story to tell when you're in an interview rather than, I thought I'd give it a go. That isn't going to cut it. They're going to want to know you're staying. So, I'm just going to breeze through that. Again, we'll advise on this before you go over for interviews as well.
We've actually had lawyers turn down for jobs that didn't have a really good story to tell their potential employers as to why they wanted the location and why they wanted that particular firm. That's where we can come in to give you all of that advice and all of that prep before you do anything. Our process is, if you're thinking about moving in the next 12 months, talk to us now, start familiarising yourself with the markets, start understanding your firm names, start working through how that process might work, start telling your family and friends here that you've got intention to move. And we do also have the ability to connect you with lawyers that we've placed over in Australia that can give you real on-the-ground knowledge, give you a network and really help you through some of those key experiences. Also, from our side, we'd want to go through a rigorous process in terms of interviewing you. Then we'd be introducing you to a colleague on the ground in Australia. This would all be by VC, of course. During that process, we'll handhold you whilst they're organising interviews. For some of those CVs that don't have a natural fit within a very specific area, our team will want to go and temperature check the market with your CV with our clients over there that we've built up really great relationships with, to see how your skills fit into particular roles, and again, whether that's something that you're going to be interested in moving forward. Once we've gone through that interview process, we'll negotiate offers for you, we'll create that acceptance, confirm start dates, and start booking tickets.
And we'll just go into some Q&As. So we did have the option for you to ask questions once you registered for the webinar. So I've taken a handful of ones that we may not have covered throughout the webinar, and we'll answer those now. So do firms offer a relocation package? It's a mixed bag, mainly for those more senior, so those four-year PQE. We do see it there, and it can be anything between $5,000 to $20,000, and it's not usually paid as a lump sum. It's normally used for things like flights, rental, transportation, personal belongings being brought over, including pets. So you will need to keep receipts for that, and it would be something that's reimbursed. So yeah, it really is a mixed bag. Obviously, it depends on the city, the law firms, but it is definitely something that is common.
That relocation is normally around 5 to 20k, just depending on what level you're at and what the firm's prepared to offer. Cool.
Yeah, so
Firms hiring and qualified lawyers in commercial property. Oh, this is an interesting one because commercial property is really, really different across the states compared to New Zealand law. It's one that we've found has quite a big learning curve. The big player is Sydney, so they are willing to kind of accommodate the very wide differences between the two markets. Not as much in Melbourne. We have placed lawyers successfully in the space, but they have had to go through, as I said, quite the knowledge gap. So those firms might want to take a little bit more of your PQE off from where you're at the moment, just to give you a real soft landing on the other side to make sure you can get up to speed at a level that, you know, is sustainable and that's really comfortable for you.
Good stuff. So I think we covered this next question already, but what is the Australian equivalent of a legal executive? So yeah, we talked about paralegal positions, legal assistants. So there definitely are positions there for legal executives, so New Zealand qualified legal executives. They're just titled slightly different. So obviously we've covered that off. So we'll skip on to the next question.
Great. So we've had a question about age restriction. There isn't really. I would consider what the sweet spots we've discussed in terms of PQE are, and see if you fit into that bracket. So no real age restriction. Just see whether you feel your skills and experience marry up to what we've discussed as being a lawyer that we can place.
Good stuff. Do Australian firms assist and pay for the application admission to relevant state bars? Again, it's a mixed bag. Some do, some don't, but it is common. We do see it more often than not.
Great. Final question that we've had, job opportunities like in Australia, forensic qualified lawyers who work as a trust, estates, RP, and the family. Being brutally honest, there isn't as much appetite as there are for specialist lawyers, e.g. employment law, but it's still not impossible. Melbourne is super duper difficult. We've seen lawyers in these areas go over to Melbourne and return because they've really, really struggled to find work, or they've found work in firms that maybe haven't been able to support them as well as what they could have. We'll take it on a case-by-case basis. So if you want us to explore that or give you advice if you've got experience in that area, we'd need to review your CV. We'd need to review what jobs were available at the time. We've had success where, again, candidates have allowed us to take their CV and talk to our contacts on more of a speculative basis, and approach firms and, you know, really talk to them without necessarily having a full job description. So as long as an individual is open to working with us and giving us the opportunity to approach law firms on that basis, then we do tend to have more success than if we're just trying to carve out a particular role. So an open mind and flexibility works wonders for us in those sectors. I think that's the questions that we had.
Yeah, we just had one on YouTube, which I missed, which was, will this be available? Again, we've mentioned that we are recording this, so over the coming days we will have this online on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and various other channels. So if there's anything that we've skipped through quite quickly, including the salaries and stuff where we flicked through those slides, all that stuff will be available for you, and then yeah, obviously our contact details. So look, obviously everything we talk about is confidential. It's worth a conversation if it's something you're thinking about, and you can reach us either in Christchurch, Auckland, or our handles are there as well. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
Great, thanks all for attending. We hope that's been useful. As Ben said, if you do want to talk to us on a confidential basis, even if it's a minor point, just to kind of cover something off with no obligation whatsoever, yeah, we're open to chatting. We really hope that you've, as I said, found that useful. We've really enjoyed presenting that. We will be repeating this in a couple of weeks' time. Yeah, just keep an eye out because we've always got new information to share as that market is growing and changing. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.